Welcome to another episode of Living Your Sparked Second Half. And if you are listening to this and then you move on to listen to the episode, you'll notice my voice is a little different. That's because I was sick when I recorded that, but I feel so much better and I am back to the land of the living. I have had the worst cold ever. My husband said his friend was telling him that it's called the 100-day cold. This is actually 3 weeks and 1 day, and I'm still blowing my nose a little bit. But anywho, today I have a great interview for you with Ann Richardson. Ann is 81, spunky. She's an American living abroad in Great Britain. She met her husband. You'll hear the story. It's a great story. Still in love after 60 years. He sounds like he's a wonderful man to be married to, a wonderful partner, very supportive of her whole life. It's great to have people around you like that. What I wanted her on the podcast to talk about was assumptions, because she had made a couple of assumptions, wrong assumptions, and I think assumptions often are wrong. That's what they say, right? You probably heard the phrase, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, because you often jump to conclusions. That's what an assumption is. It's based on facts that you think are facts, but aren't really facts. They're facts based on only your little window and perspective of those moments. And often it's an interaction. And sometimes these assumptions are because of strangers, because you don't know strangers. But I think that's the main mistake a lot of us make, is that we make assumptions about the people we know, but we don't even know the whole story. But we think we do because we know them. And so assumptions are something that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of when we're jumping to conclusions, and we shouldn't do that because that is judgmental. We're judging something and interpreting a situation, and more than likely is incorrect. So she wrote this article I read, and sharing a couple of incidences that she had had in the previous week where she made assumptions. And she was very vulnerable in the article, which I loved, because I think that's what really resonates. When you share what you did and you're reflecting on it, but that lesson, as you're learning it and you share it, it can help other people. So I wanted to talk about this article she wrote and assumptions, just have that conversation. But the conversation led to so much more. I mean, an 81-year-old grandma who stands on her head, she wrote a book, The Grandma Who Stands on Her Head, which are her reflections. You can learn so much from somebody who's lived such a full life. And I wanted to hear her perspectives. We talked about many things. We talked about how you get confidence. We talked about what is luck. Are people lucky or unlucky? We talked about, I had to pick up my dog. He's barking. So now he's in my lap if you're on my YouTube channel. We talked about authenticity. She is super authentic. And we talked about, why is it that we wait till late in life to become our most authentic selves? A wonderful conversation. It just sped by and I loved every minute. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Ann Richardson. Today, my guest is Ann Richardson. We've been chatting for a bit, meeting each other. Welcome to the program, Ann.
Thank you.
Yes, Ann is 81, and she was not shy about her age. She is very proud of her age, which I love, and also her height. She said she's short. Usually people, when they say they're well, you didn't even say you're self-conscious. You just said you don't care. It doesn't bother you at all about your height. And I immediately went to tall. I can't see you because I can only see you from the neck up. So Ann is talking to me from across the sea. She is in London and she is American born. So she's going to tell you about that story. But I met Anne because she wrote an article that I loved. I thought it was a great article, and we'll talk about that. But it was an article about assumptions. And so I think that's something that everybody should hear about. And what happened to you when I read that, I thought about assumptions I've made in my life. That's a great topic. And that's why I reached out to her and wanted to have a conversation. So here we are. And I also believe Anne can inspire because she is living life and excited and happy and engaged. And that's where we all want to be as we get older. So, yes, Anne, I'm so excited to talk to you. So, share a little bit about you and who you are. What do you want to say?
Yeah, that's a big question. So, I am born in America. I just think that's relevant, and you can probably hear my American accent because you don't lose it no matter how long you live away from America. I've lived in England since 1968 because I married an Englishman. He was doing a PhD over in America for a while, and then we came back to England where I'd met him in England, and I've lived here ever since. So my children are English. Just to add a completely irrelevant fact, my son married an American.
Oh, that's
Confuses
funny.
everybody.
Yeah, we shared before I hit record that she met her husband when she was abroad. Was that college, junior year of college?
Yeah, it was my
Yeah.
junior year abroad.
Yeah.
My junior
And my
year abroad.
daughter did that. She went over there and did that, but she didn't meet anybody while she was there. Thank goodness, because she lives here.
Well, I think my parents had mixed feelings about it, but they
Yeah.
didn't like the fact I was marrying a foreigner. They thought that marriage is difficult enough, and if you marry a foreigner, that's even harder. But I don't actually think that was true in our case. But I mean,
Yeah.
whatever problem we had, it wasn't to do with that. Anyway, I live
Well, you're
here.
still married, 60
I'm
years.
still married. I've been married 60 years, and at
Yeah.
60 years, you get a card from the king and queen.
Oh my
It used to be
goodness.
that you got flowers, but they stopped that fairly recently, last couple years or so. You only get a card with a picture of the king and queen on it.
Well, that's
So fun.
amazing.
My,
Congratulations. You don't
I'm
get
not
that in
going to.
America.
Anyway, my daughter now has that card. I've spent my life doing social research, that's research on issues to do with healthcare or social care, often to do with the patient's point of view. What do they feel about their cancer care? It's not to do with the medication side of it, it's to do with the care that they got or their experiences of it. But I did lots of other things, and I went freelance from being working in a salaried institute. I went freelance in my mid 40s, which gave me a lot of freedom. And I got asked to do a lot of different things. And that was a lot of fun. And I still get a lot of pleasure out of life. And that's enough
Yeah.
to start. Yeah, you asked for a quick one. That's quick.
Yeah. Well, what is clear is that you are giving value to the world and you feel valued.
Yes, I like to think I'm giving value to the world. I don't hear it too often. So it's nice to hear.
Yeah, but your contributions, your articles that you write, I mean, you wouldn't have met me if you hadn't put that out in the world.
Yeah.
And I can just tell that you feel, and I think that's a very important part of aging, the aging process. I think what happens to a lot of women, especially when their kids leave, is that that's where they got their value from, is being a mom. And then
Yeah.
they are searching for new value. And maybe the work, you loved your work. So you got value from your work. But I think a lot of people are misplaced in the work they do and they don't get the value. And so it's kind of just a paycheck they're collecting. So where do they find that value? And that I think gives us vitality as we age.
I was talking to a friend who's writing a book that's about to come out. I won't make a big fuss about that, but it's about finding your passion, finding out what it is that really makes you want to get up in the morning. And I sort of looked at him and thought, is that difficult? Because I've always known why I wanted to get up in the morning. First, it was my kids or my work, and now it's my grandkids. So they're definitely worth getting up in the morning for. I may say they're now teenagers, which is hard to believe. So, yes, it is to do with having something that you find intrinsically interesting. And I do guess some people do find it hard to know what they find intrinsically interesting.
Yeah, you said when we were talking that you speak up, you're very direct. I feel like you're very authentic. You've always been who you are. You don't
Yes, that's
hide and you don't try to be
oh,
somebody else. And a
no.
lot of people, unfortunately, and the statistic is 70% are trying to be somebody they're not, to please or to fit
Yes,
in. And they feel that they can't be who they are because they'll be judged or they'll be rejected. So you are
You know why I do
unusual.
it? But you know why I do it? I don't know how to do anything else.
Yes,
It's
amen.
I
You
made the
must have had great
decision.
parents who just let you be you.
I don't know. I just don't know how to hide. And in England, nobody says what they mean. English people are famous for saying what they feel they ought to say or putting things very gently. They can insult you, but put it so gently you don't actually realize you are being insulted. They are really very clever with subtle language. And I just say it like it is. I heard a friend describe me once, and she said, "You know, Anne, she actually says what she means." And I thought that's a strange thing. Of course, I say what I mean. But anyway, that's not common here.
Well,
So
that's
yes,
interesting
but
about the
it's fun
culture.
that I know how to be.
Yeah. If anybody says anything to me with an English accent, I like it. So I
Yeah.
just love that accent. All right. So you're 81 and you wrote this article recently about assumptions.
Yeah.
And I just thought it's definitely worth a conversation with you because we have these facts. We look at something and we see something and we hear something and it goes through our filter and they become our facts. They become our belief, even if it's like a stranger that we saw. In your case, it was in these two instances. And unfortunately, most of the time, we don't get our facts straight. We just
No.
walk away and we move on. And it's with people we love and people we know too. It's in the workplace. We make these assumptions. We have no idea of the history, the background. We have our filter on. And so I would love for you to share these two stories. And if you're listening and you tend to make assumptions a lot, I would love for you to pay attention and think about something in the past week, perhaps, that you made an assumption about. And it could totally be the wrong, well, what I like to say, it's your fake news in your head, but you think it's
Yeah.
real, but you think it's real. So share those.
Well, I think it happens all the time. I wrote an article about two of them just because they were very recent. One was I was in the tube, that's what you call the subway, going downtown. There were these people talking very loudly, and that's very annoying. It's also very un-English to talk loudly. People talk very quietly to each other. But these people were shouting, and I thought it was sort of annoying because I was trying to think my own thoughts and I couldn't think because they were shouting. And it so happened they got off at the same stop as I did, and they came up the elevator at the same time as I did. We say lift, but anyway, I turned to this woman who was shouting, and I said, "Why are you shouting so much?" And it was supposed to be slightly showing my annoyance, but also just asking the question. I was hoping moderately nicely because I have a sort of nice face, and I figure people don't get insulted immediately, though people do get insulted by me. And she said, "Oh, my son has learning difficulties, and we found if we shout, it helps him to speak better." And she immediately shouted down to him to speak quieter. And I felt very sort of, it made me reflect that I had suddenly made an assumption they were just loud people being annoying, and they
Mhm.
actually were trying to cope with something much more difficult than I've ever had to cope with. A son with learning difficulties is an enormous problem. So that was the first one.
Yeah, and I want to make a couple comments here because first of all, you're direct. Your
Yes.
directness, as you said, you say what you think.
Yeah.
Sometimes, because I'm direct too, it can get us in a little trouble. But it sounded like you did it with a little bit of softness, at least in your eyes. The second thing is that I love that you made it a question instead of a
Yeah.
comment, because some people could have said, "Would you please keep your voice down?" and
Yeah.
not even
Yeah.
questioned why. And so you at least gave her the opportunity to explain. Most people would have been on their merry way with the continued fake news that that's an annoying woman and child. And if you saw him again, you'd probably, oh, there's that annoying woman and child.
Well, I'm not someone to tell off complete strangers. It just somehow seems wrong. So that's what I did.
Yeah,
Now, the second one, if shall I go on to the second one,
sure.
is in my opinion much more interesting. It's a silly thing. I had a problem with my phone. I had a new mobile phone and I couldn't get it to work. And there's a very nice man who works in my print shop who I know very well. We've known each other. I know since he's moved into the neighborhood, and he's done all my printing, which is a lot over the years. So he always helps me. So I went to him and I said, "Could you help me with my phone?" But like me, he's getting on in years. And so he said, "I can't do it. Actually, my colleague here, who's a lot younger, will be able to do it for you." if you just wait a minute. So I thought that's fair enough. He was very polite. And I decided to wait. And there was this woman customer who was a total pain. She didn't know what she wanted. She kept changing her mind. She seemed a bit ditzy. She was saying, I want 5 of this. No, no, I want 10 of that. No, I want 20 of this. And it was all over the place. And I thought, what a pain. And I just thought she was, I don't know what I quite thought, but she was very, very annoying. And after a while, I decided it was going to take too long. So I made my excuses and left, and actually got someone else to help me with my mobile phone, which was a small thing, really. And later, because I thought I might have looked impolite, and this is an old friend, the guy who runs the print shop, I sort of know him almost as a friend, my neighborhood shops I know. And I phoned him and I said, I'm terribly sorry. I hope I didn't seem impolite to leave, but I actually had an appointment. I was actually going to give a talk about my book, so I had to get out of there. And he said, oh, no, he said, you did fine. He said, I couldn't tell you then, but the woman who was having so much trouble was an Israeli woman who happened to be visiting London as a tourist, and she had just learned that her entire family had been wiped out by a bomb. This was in early October. It was after the events in Israel, but it was some maybe a couple
Oh,
of
so
weeks after,
recent. Yeah.
very recent. And she just couldn't decide what she was trying to sort out the death notices for her family. And I immediately felt, oh my God, I couldn't possibly be as lucid as she was in those circumstances. She was actually trying her best to create death notices for a family when she's lost her whole family. It did make me stop and think, why was I thinking she was such a ditz and so annoying? And it just is another example. I never saw her again, but how much we do make assumptions about what people are like without
Yeah. And
thinking about it.
on reflection, how would you, knowing what you know, and we make assumptions, how would you have thought differently maybe in those situations?
Well, had I known that was her circumstance, I think I probably would have left immediately and not waited to have my phone fixed, which was an extremely minor issue, having a mobile phone fixed next to having something like 5 or 6 members of her family killed. I mean, that's just so, yes, you just have to maybe if you give people the benefit of the doubt, is a good idea in general from general experience that there's often a good reason why people are annoying. Maybe they just had an argument with their husband that morning, maybe something more than that. And it would be a good idea to
Hmm.
give
Yeah.
people the benefit of the doubt is
Yeah.
a general rule, I would say.
Yeah. I think our tendency as humans who are dealing with our own issues and stress, a lot of us are under stress. I think our tendency is to look at things with a critical eye, to
Mm.
with more judgment. Whereas coming from lived a lot of life of judgment in the past, and now I'm aware of how I can be judgmental, and so I try to catch myself, like, well, what are you thinking? Why are you doing that? So try to be more of an observer of my thoughts. But we all fall into that. But if we could just be more loving, I think the whole world culture that's going on with hate and
Yeah.
violence, that's what we're exposed to. And especially if you watch the news a lot, you're going to be highly critical of people. You're going to be highly apprehensive. You're going to be thinking the worst. So I think if we could just remember to come from a loving place and know that everybody's doing their best, everybody's trying, and everybody has their own baggage they're carrying around that's invisible to us, I think we'd
I
be a lot
completely
happier.
agree. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. I didn't ask you and won't ask you how old you are, but we come from a time when things were more civilized. I grew up, I was born in the war, and so people post-war when I was first growing up were just glad to be alive and
Mm. Yeah.
coping with fairly difficult times. My husband grew up during rationing and didn't have
Hmm.
much to eat after the war. So it's a different time than now. And hating anybody was really a bit of a luxury, I suspect.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I sort
I
of
was born
knew
in
before. Yeah,
59, so I was just made the 50s. But yeah, so I'm getting ready to turn 65 in less
that's
than a
good age.
month. So, what can you share about the lessons you've learned in life? What have you learned in your 81 years that you can share? And this is a question I love to ask is what would you tell your younger self?
Lessons in general are too broad a question. But what I would tell my younger self, most importantly, is to have confidence in myself.
Mm,
I don't know why it takes us till we're 65 or around then to believe in ourselves. It seems to be very common. I say it over and over, and I've talked to lots of people, and they all say, "Yeah, I'm beginning to believe I'm okay," And I thought, why? Why does it take us that long? We were just as good when we were 45, but we don't believe it. So my interest is in getting to people to trust themselves, to believe in themselves. I suppose there's some people that probably shouldn't believe in themselves, but we won't go there right now. But I certainly wish I had believed in myself. I think I would have been even stronger, even more able to do more, I think,
And how do you
differently.
get belief in yourself, though? I
I
think
don't
when
know.
we get older, we're just like, fuck it. We just
Yeah.
like get there and we're like, I got the wrinkles, I got the weight. Yeah, I just got to accept it or else, you know? And so we're
Care.
just like more loving to ourselves. And then we see our friends and they're the same. And, we all support each other. So what gets confidence?
Well, I think knowing that you've done a certain amount of things and they've worked out reasonably well helps a great deal. I
Yes.
happen to have one of the most loving husbands ever, and I think that helps a great deal. He says things to me like, "You're prettier than you used to be," just silly
Oh,
things like that. He loves the fact when I have success. He's always incredibly proud of me when I do anything that achieves something, which is not huge things. When
so
anything is
that to me is find people who believe in you
yes,
before you
yes.
believe in yourself.
Yes, it certainly helps because I live with him every day and I see him every day and he's just always complimenting me, probably more than vice versa. But anyway, he is. That's his
What a
manner.
great chap.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's very nice. And he didn't used to, but now he does a lot of things in the house much more than he used to. So he actually makes my lunch and all that kind of thing. But
Nice.
so that's great. But also, I know that I've written books and people have liked them. You said you read my blog and you liked it.
Hmm.
Every time that happens, puts a little something onto yourself that makes you feel good with yourself. And the
Yeah.
more often that happens, and it doesn't happen much in your 20s because you don't do much that anybody thinks is great unless you're just very pretty and you get wrapped up in how you look. But
But
the
even then,
older,
they don't have confidence deep down.
no, I know,
Yeah.
that's true. The
One of
whole
my
issue.
daughters was always like people would look at her because she's very beautiful. And they told her that a lot. And she got to the point where she hated it because she said, people don't see me. That's all they see is this. She's a very deep and very intelligent, and people don't look for that and they don't try to go deep. So it's
No.
kind of interesting. Yeah. Looks don't give you confidence, but the people who don't have looks think they need that to get confidence.
Yeah, I think it's doing things and seeing yourself coping in a lot of different circumstances, seeing yourself cope with things that you didn't think, like just even, I don't sleep well. And when you once discover that you can cope and get through the day and actually be moderately lucid on 4.5 hours sleep, then the next time you get 4.5 hours sleep, you're not worried about it because you know you can do it. So each time you do something that you learn you know you can do, the more it helps.
Yeah.
And
Take action that gets some results. And I like to say, just make progress because making
yes,
progress is results and not taking action. And I think a lot of people don't take action these days because there's so many other things to do to occupy their brain, like
yeah,
watch TV
yeah.
and get on
Yeah.
social media. And
I do think one should just do things, and I do have a tendency to jump in and see what happens. And sometimes bad things happen, but generally good things happen. You
but
just
you
never
still
know.
learn.
And you learn exactly, and you gain from the learning, and you meet some nice people or not, as the case may be. But each thing is learning and developing. And with my blogs, I may say it's another blog. Whatever happens that goes wrong, I can write a blog about it. I actually constantly reflecting. I'm a very reflective person anyway, but I'm constantly reflecting on what's going on around me. It's not that I'm wanting to write a blog because I'm reflective, but it's just I like writing and I can think
Mm.
about it and then I learn something and I move on. So I did that with the assumptions blog was just, I thought, well, I've goofed up twice here in a week, but I
Well, and I
can learn.
think that article also was vulnerable. And
Yes.
when writers come from that vulnerable place, it's so relatable.
Mm,
It's like, oh my gosh. And a lot of mentors are like this, where they teach from what they've learned. And
mm,
when they speak from the place where they are, it's hard to relate. But when they speak from the place where they came from, it's like, oh my
yes.
God, I so get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we haven't
Yeah.
talked about your book. I'm so sorry that I haven't mentioned your book. I love the title of your book, The Granny Who Stands on Her Head.
I've written a lot of books. I'd make sure which one we're talking
Oh,
about.
well, I want to read that book. What did she stand on her head?
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
really stand on your head?
I do really stand on my head. I really do. And there's a video of me doing so in a number of places. It's actually, if you put the granny who stands on her head into YouTube and put my name, Ann Richardson, I think it comes up automatically. I didn't put it on YouTube. I have no idea who put it on
Oh,
YouTube.
how
But
funny.
I did it for fun to advertise my book, which I had a number of titles for this book, which is supposed to be about what I've learned being older. It's called Reflections on Growing Older in the subtitle. But I thought that's such a catchy title. And once you've heard it, you won't forget it. That I just couldn't resist putting it as the title of my book. But yes, I do yoga. I've been doing yoga for 30 years. And once a week, I do my yoga class and I stand on my head. And I love standing on my head. The world feels very good upside down somehow.
How long do
But
you
I,
do it for?
4 minutes, 3, 4 minutes. Used to do 5. I'm not sure to do still. I think it's not as good as you get older. I think you should be a little bit more careful when you get older. So
Mm.
I get nervous. I could stay up there longer than I do, but I think I don't want to do my neck any harm.
So you
It,
started, and I think this is an important tidbit. If I'm doing the math correctly, you started yoga when you were in your
yes,
50s, at
yes,
50. What
yes.
prompted you to do that?
I had a lot of back trouble, and I was going to a woman who gave me back physiotherapy. And I said, but it helps for a while and then it doesn't last. She said, what you really need is to do work that makes you stronger. She said, try yoga. So I went and tried. A number of my friends had been pushing me to do yoga anyway. So I went to yoga and it did help my back. And I never went back to physiotherapy. So she talked herself out of a job as far as I was concerned. But it does strengthen you, and I am very strong.
And you
I'm
don't
just
need any peripheral like weights, or you don't have to spend money really on anything but a mat,
That's
right?
true. I never thought about it like that, but I do think what I feel that at my age, I'm not likely to fall, or if I do fall, I will fall carefully. I've twice fallen in the last 3 years, and both times I had almost no damage to me. And I think it must
Oh,
be to do with my yoga. I don't know, but I
you
just,
bounced.
yeah. And you fall somehow
Well,
easily,
you're
and
short, so you felt closer to the
you're
ground.
strong everywhere. Yoga
Yeah.
strengthens you everywhere. I mean, my back is strong, my neck is strong, my legs are strong.
Well,
I
you're
don't move.
clearly stayed consistent at it. And a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people do something to get better and then they fall off the
Yes,
wagon. So that's great that you've done that and made the time
yeah,
for it. But
yeah.
it makes sense now that you're 81 and you're healthy and vital and that you have
I mean, I
a
happen to
practice.
inherit good health, I think. I'm just very lucky with my good health, and I'm reluctant to say so in case something hits me tomorrow.
I
I did write a
know.
blog once. I wrote a
Don't
blog
jinx it.
once called That Block of Concrete in the Sky. And I had just said to a friend that I feel once you're over 60, 65, 70, anyway, there's a block of concrete following you around over your head and likely to fall at some point and hit you. I mean, it's that feeling that anything could happen anytime. I just called it
Yeah.
that block of concrete in the sky.
Yeah.
And
And if you
I said
think
this
that,
to
how do you live your life differently?
you can't. You just know it's going to happen. And actually, about 2 months after I told that, my husband had a stroke. And that
Mm,
was very, very scary. In fact, he was not a bad stroke and he's recovered completely from it. So he's fine. But it was very scary when I knew he was
I
in hospital
bet.
with a stroke
I
because we
bet.
were very close. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to be the carer of somebody who was really lost to us, which can
Yeah.
happen.
You don't want to lose
So,
your biggest cheerleader. That would be so
yes.
sad. But yeah, when you said that, think about was, I guess if you think that you're walking around with a concrete block over your head, it makes you want to live life a little richer
Yes,
while you're
there is
here.
that.
It's like,
Yeah, do it while you can. Do it while
yeah,
you can.
yeah.
I mean, I talk to a lot of people about being old, and I get a number of different responses. Very recently, I met a woman in the street, and we got talking, and she said she thought she knew me, and I didn't know her. But anyway, I said, I write about being old. I said, why I like being old. She said, yeah. She said, you just don't care anymore. You just don't care anymore. And I actually should have pressed her more because I want to write a blog about you just don't care anymore.
Hmm.
But it's a nice phrase. It means you do what you want, it doesn't matter. And you just get on with it. We talked about that already a bit, but there is that feeling. On the other hand, I talked to a woman and I wrote a blog called This, which was my future is behind me. All my future is behind me. This woman said she was 65. I said, I'm 81 and I like it. She said, I'm 65 and I hate it. And I said, why? Because all my future is behind me. And the more I thought about that, the more I wrote this blog about how your future isn't behind me and how much has happened to me since I was 65. I did not have my two grandchildren when I was 65, and I hadn't written all the things I've done. I haven't written the books. I've did several books I've written since I was 65. I haven't had all the wonderful bits of life that I've had, just living with my husband or going to the movies or going for a walk and smelling the sunshine or whatever you want to talk about. So I was very sad, but it was interesting. And that blog actually is very well liked by people because it says something about what you can feel and what you shouldn't feel in a way. I've always wondered whether the woman who said that to me ever found it again. Because
She
I
might
gave
not
her
be alive because if that's
no,
what your outlook,
I think she was going to be alive, but she was just a bit sad. But she wasn't depressed. She didn't strike me as depressed. But
hopefully she
she
found a future.
she was interested in my book, but she never tried to contact me again. But it's an
Mm,
interesting concept that my future is all behind me when you're
it
65.
is. That's why I like the second half spark, and the second half
Yes,
is the best half because I like to
better.
think the present moment is always the best part of your life.
I do
And
think so.
so
I do. Even
people want to
now, I
live in the
think so.
past and they think all the happy times and the happy memories, and those memories are great, but those memories create it's that body of work. It's the book that's been written, and you've always got a new book to write and new chapters to write and new chapters to live. So, and speaking of that, as we close, I want to ask you about your future. What are you looking forward to?
Well, that's a good question. I've had my husband not very well for some time, in the sense that he had this stroke, it was about 2 years ago, and then he had terrible fatigue. So he was fine at home, but he couldn't go out. And now all of a sudden, he's beginning to get better. We don't know why, but suddenly the fatigue is lifting. So I'm looking forward to maybe traveling a little bit with him, which we couldn't do.
And
That
where
would
do you
be
want to
nice.
go? Where would be the
Um,
first place?
oh, probably Italy. I'm a great lover
Ooh,
of Italy.
I love Italy too.
Both places.
What part?
We go to Paris a lot. We used to go to Paris a lot, so I would be going back to Paris. I have friends in Paris. I have friends in Venice. I have friends in Rome. I have
Oh,
a lot of European friends. If you live here, they're very close, you
that's
know.
awesome. That's
People always
awesome.
say, "Do you want to go back to America?" And I said, "Well, all my life, when my parents were alive, I went back to see my parents. But after that, if you have a choice of going to America or going to Italy or to France or to Greece or to Spain, I mean, to me, there's no choice."
Well, yeah, you're so close, just a hop, skip, and a
Exactly.
jump, mostly
Oh,
a
I
train
can come
ride
to
away,
Paris.
right?
3 hours, literally
Yeah,
door to door, 3 hours. It's
yeah,
nothing. You know,
yeah. So if you
where you,
had to, because I think I have travelers who are listeners, I know I like to
yeah.
travel. If you had to recommend one place in Italy to go if they've never been to Italy, where
Oh
would
gosh, that's
I've not been to
impossible.
the Amalfi. I've been to the lowest I've gotten is Sorrento and went to Capri for the day, but I haven't been below that.
Capri is gorgeous. That is a wonderful place to go, but it's very touristy, is
Quite an
unfortunate.
experience, yes. Got to take
Tuscany
your
is
money.
Tuscany is absolutely gorgeous. The Italians are very friendly people, so you get a lot of friendliness from them, especially in the countryside. You go to Florence, there's some wonderful art and it's a beautiful city, but I think they're used to tourists as being a kind of annoyance and they're not really very friendly to tourists. So I don't recommend that. I happen to love Venice because Venice is like no other place in the world. It's an entire city without cars. You can walk and walk and walk, and you never see a car. There are no cars. It is impossible for anyone to believe there is a city without cars, and it is Venice.
Yeah,
Everything
that's
is done
that's
by
great.
boat.
Yeah, yeah,
The garbage is collected by boat. The ambulances to come by boat. Everything is by boat. So I would recommend just to see that in your life because it's
yeah,
such an unusual place.
yeah. And I never knew this, but if you want to buy something while you're over there, and I have a beautiful vase painted with brilliant colors, glass. It's like a
Yes,
decanter that I got in Venice.
yes,
But glass and lace are the two things that you,
yes.
yeah.
I'm not a things person. I really don't care about things, but
Yeah.
I
I like to, when I go somewhere, to bring a memento
yes, I can
of a
understand that.
memory. Usually I get a Christmas ornament if I can find one. Just so when I hang my Christmas tree
Yes.
ornaments, I always have that memory. That's part of my
Oh,
experience of my tree.
that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. So I
That's nice.
appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. You are amazing. I want to be like you when I grow up. I'm not far behind, but it was funny. My husband, we were having this conversation about growing old, and the subject came up of 100. I don't know how that came up because I always say I expect to live to be 100 and I expect to live with vitality. I don't expect to be in an assisted living place. And again, you do not know what can happen to you,
I
but if
don't
you take
know.
care of yourself and
Yeah.
you do the things you love, you should be rewarded for that physically and mentally.
You should be, but you can't
Yeah.
count on it.
And so
Luck,
he said, I
luck
don't want to live to
is
be
very,
100 because I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be an old and feeble person. And I said, well, who says you have to be old and feeble when you're 100?
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
going to be that when I get to be 100. I am going to be, because I do flips when I go to the trampoline park with my
yeah.
grandkids. And I said, I'm going to be doing flips at the trampoline park when I'm 100.
I
That's what I
hope
told him.
I wish you so. I do think luck is a very important quality in our lives that we don't appreciate enough. Luck in finding the right people in our lives, luck in
Yes.
finding the right job in your lives, and luck
And
in your
genes
health.
plays into it, I think, too. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But you didn't know
Which
who
is luck,
genes you
I
had.
think. Yeah.
I mean, people say, I do well because I work hard. But what gave you the ability to work hard? What gave you the urge to work hard? Something in you gave you that urge. It's not because you're brilliant and deserving. It's because you had some ability to work hard. So whatever it is, it comes down to luck in the end, in my view.
Mm.
That's
Well, I
karma.
like to look at luck as in the universal sense. We earned it through, we chose to come here and live this life in this human state. And our luck is in a way brought because we chose it. We chose it. And we can choose to look at it as luck, but we can choose to look at it as, hey, it was a part of what I was meant to do and what I was meant to be here doing. And people, I feel like people who think they need luck end up becoming victims. So they end up saying, I'm unlucky. And then they use it as an excuse to not do the things that can enhance their
That
life and
can
enrich their life.
be.
Mm-hmm.
That can be. And there's a famous saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And
Yeah.
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But honest to God, there are people in this world who are unhealthy for no fault of their own. And I have some sympathy for them.
Yes. Yeah.
You have children born
Mm-hmm.
with disabilities, and it takes all your energy to look after those children for the rest of your life. And that wasn't,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it just happened to you.
Yep. Yep.
You
But
have
then
other
it's funny
people.
because some people who are like that think they're lucky. So it
Yes, I know.
becomes the mindset thing. Like I
I know.
know that parents of Down's syndrome children are like, we can't imagine life without this
Oh, I know
person.
that. I know. Yeah.
It's interesting. We could have another podcast episode about this. We should both do our
We'll come
research
back
and
if
get
you
back
want.
on.
If you want, I'll come back. I don't mind. I'm happy to talk
Yeah.
for hours.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your sharing openly. Thank you for being you. Thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
being
much.
an example of what you can be by being you.
Yeah, everybody's themselves, so I don't want them to think they want to be me. What I want to say is you can still be having a happy, fulfilled life at 81, and I hope 85, and I hope 89, and I hope 99, but you never know. But
Yeah.
you shouldn't give up, and you should keep finding things that keep you happy because there's no reason not to. There's no reason
Hmm.
to stop.
Keep looking and believe that it's possible, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And good health to your husband. And
Thank you.
when I'm over in England, I'll look you up.
Yeah, do that.
Thank you so
I'll take
much.
you to the pub.
Bye.